It wasn't a leak. It wasn't a document dump. It wasn't a secret recording. It was a question. And somehow, that question hit harder than any revelation could have. Joe Rogan leaned into the microphone, paused for a beat longer than usual, and said, "At what point do we admit that power clusters exist? Not conspiracies, not secret handshakes in dark rooms, but real networks of influence that shape outcomes in ways regular people never see." That was it. No accusation, no names, just a structural observation. Within hours, clips were everywhere, because people heard different things in that sentence. Some heard him implying corruption, others heard him stating the obvious, and that tension is what broke the internet. Rogan wasn't talking about a shadow government. He wasn't claiming there's a hidden council controlling everything. He was talking about how power actually works. Access, money, education, social circles, board memberships, private conferences, philanthropic foundations, elite universities, political fundraisers, think tanks. When the same 100 or 1,000 people circulate through those spaces, he said, that's not a conspiracy, that's a network. And networks matter. He explained how influence doesn't require criminal coordination. It doesn't require secret meetings plotting world domination. It requires shared incentives. People in similar positions, corporate executives, high-level politicians, major investors, academic leaders, often attend the same conferences, sit on overlapping boards, fund similar initiatives, and move within the same professional circles. That overlap creates alignment. Alignment creates momentum. Momentum shapes policy and culture. Most power, Rogan said, isn't dramatic, it's incremental. That line caught fire because it reframed the conversation. Instead of asking, is there a secret cabal? He asked, how transparent are influence networks? He walked listeners through examples that aren't scandalous, but revealing. A CEO steps down from a regulatory advisory board and later joins a private firm affected by those regulations. A political staffer rotates into a lobbying position. A major donor funds academic research that influences policy debates. A former intelligence official becomes a corporate consultant in the same sector. None of that is illegal. Much of it is standard practice. But when viewed collectively, it forms a lattice of influence. People say elite network and imagine robes and candles, Rogan said. I'm talking about LinkedIn on steroids. That line went viral instantly because it made the abstract concrete. He emphasized repeatedly that he was not accusing specific individuals of crimes. He was interrogating structure. Is it wrong for successful people to know each other? He asked. No, but when decision-making power concentrates socially, that has consequences. He described how access to high-level policy discussions often requires credentials, wealth, or connections unavailable to most citizens. This doesn't mean outcomes are automatically corrupt, but it does mean representation isn't evenly distributed. He argued that public trust erodes when decisions appear to emerge from insular circles, not because those circles are inherently malicious, but because they are opaque. Opacity breeds suspicion. Suspicion fuels narrative extremes. Rogan's critics quickly accused him of flirting with conspiracy thinking. His supporters argued he was describing something obvious. The truth sat somewhere quieter. He wasn't saying elites secretly control every event. He was saying influence ecosystems are real and under-examined. He brought up the concept of revolving doors in Washington, the movement between public office and private sector roles. That pattern isn't hidden, it's documented, but its cumulative effect rarely gets long-form scrutiny outside policy journals. Imagine if regular people had the same access loops, he said. Would we trust the system more? That question lingered. Because transparency isn't just about publishing disclosures, it's about accessibility. He also discussed media networks. High-profile journalists, politicians, CEOs, and cultural figures often move in overlapping social spaces, award ceremonies, policy summits, global conferences. Again, not illegal, not inherently unethical, but proximity shapes perspective. When you socialize with someone, Rogan said, it's harder to interrogate them aggressively. That comment sparked debate. Journalists pushed back, arguing professional standards exist to prevent social familiarity from influencing coverage. Rogan acknowledged that many reporters maintain strict ethical lines, but he maintained that social overlap affects culture subtly. He stressed something important. There's a difference between structural influence and criminal conspiracy. Structural influence can exist without illegal coordination. Power concentrates naturally around resources. Wealth attracts access. Access attracts opportunity. Opportunity reinforces wealth. It's a feedback loop, and feedback loops rarely distribute evenly. He also addressed philanthropy. Major donors fund universities, research initiatives, global health projects, policy institutes. Philanthropy can do enormous good, but it can also shape research priorities. When someone funds something, Rogan said, they're choosing what gets attention. That's not villainy, that's allocation. But allocation influences discourse. He warned listeners against overcorrecting into paranoia. There's no secret script, he said. There's incentive alignment. That phrase spread quickly, because incentive alignment explains coordination without requiring secret meetings. If powerful actors share economic interests, they often move in parallel directions without explicit collusion. Markets operate that way. Politics often does too. Rogan's central point was not that democracy is fake, it was that influence is uneven. And when influence appears insulated from public input, trust declines. He returned repeatedly to transparency, public disclosures, open hearings, investigative journalism, ethics rules, conflict of interest safeguards. These mechanisms exist to counterbalance concentrated influence. The problem, he argued, is perception. When scandals emerge, even isolated ones, they reinforce the belief that elite circles protect themselves. Even if that belief is exaggerated, perception shapes legitimacy. Trust, Rogan said, isn't built on perfection. It's built on visible accountability. He also challenged his audience. Don't turn this into a cartoon, he warned. There is no single mastermind. There is no universal control room. There are overlapping networks of influence operating within legal frameworks. That reality is less dramatic than conspiracy theories, but more complex. Complexity doesn't trend as easily, but complexity is closer to truth. He concluded by asking something that silenced the room. What would make people feel like they had a real seat at the table? That's the underlying issue, not secret handshakes, not hidden pyramids, representation, access, accountability. When citizens feel disconnected from decision-making processes, they search for explanations. Sometimes those explanations oversimplify, sometimes they distort. But the root frustration is often about visibility. Rogan didn't expose a classified document. He exposed a structural conversation many people avoid because it's uncomfortable. Power clusters exist, influence networks operate, transparency varies, and public trust fluctuates accordingly. That's not a conspiracy, it's sociology. The internet reaction proved his point. Some viewers filled in blanks with dramatic assumptions. Others dismissed the entire conversation as paranoia. But in the middle sat the actual discussion: how concentrated influence shapes policy, media, and economics, and how transparency can either stabilize or destabilize public confidence. The controversy wasn't in what he revealed, it was in what he refused to reduce. He didn't name villains, he didn't invent crimes, he didn't promise secret knowledge. He asked questions about systems, and systems are harder to meme than villains, but they're far more important, because if political division, institutional distrust, and cultural fragmentation are rising, examining influence structures is part of understanding why. Not to inflame, not to accuse, but to clarify. That's what broke the internet. Not scandal, not proof, but the uncomfortable recognition that power isn't evenly distributed, and that asking how it circulates is not the same thing as claiming it's evil. It's the beginning of accountability, and accountability, unlike outrage, requires patience.